let's talk about capital gain harvesting. Capital gain harvesting is really cool, and it's a really unique strategy that we have, especially if you're on the path to financial independence or if you're already financially independent. The problem is there are definitely some downsides when it comes to capital gain harvesting, and you need to understand those downsides. Stay till the end of this video because I have probably the biggest downside of capital gain harvesting. I saved it the very best for last, so make sure you stay to the end. But first, let's recap on what capital gain harvesting is, because that is super important to understand. So capital gain harvesting is basically where you intentionally sell off some of your investments in order to realize a capital gain. A long-term capital gain, that is. And so a long-term capital gain is going to be taxed at a more favorable tax rate. So if you happen to be in a lower tax rate in any what year, so which might happen if you're becoming financially independent, then you can sell off some of your assets and reset your tax basis. So for example, the tax basis. If you bought something for $100 and you sold it for $120, the tax basis was $100. The $20 that you got in addition to that, because you sold it for $120, that's known as your capital gain. Now, it's going to be a long-term capital gain if you held that asset for more than 1 year. Okay, and that's probably what most of us in the financial independence community are doing anyway. Capital gain harvesting is a strategy where we are intentionally doing that. We're intentionally realizing that $20. We're intentionally realizing those long-term capital gains because we happen to fall in the tax bracket that's going to be at a very low capital gains rate. More specifically, most of the time, it's us looking to realize long-term capital gains at 0%. The long-term capital gains rate, if you are single and you can make up to $40,400 of taxable income and you pay $0 of taxes on that. So you can easily see if you become financially independent and then that next year you don't have very much earned income or a lot of other income, you can realize a lot of long-term capital gains and you can reset your tax basis. When you reset your tax basis using capital gain harvesting, what you're doing is you're basically selling off your investments, realizing that gain, but immediately buying it right back. Now this definitely is allowed, unlike capital loss harvesting. So that is something very different. There's no kind of a wash rule when it comes to capital gain harvesting like there would be with tax loss harvesting. So this is something that you can definitely take advantage of in the financial independence community. If you are married, filing jointly, that is double. That's going to be $80,800. So literally, like for my example, I do have a pretty sizable amount of my portfolio in a taxable account, and within that taxable account, I have unrealized taxable gains. And so now that I am financially independent and not earning income from a job, my taxable income is a lot lower this year. And so I was actually able to take advantage of capital gain harvesting. Okay, but there are some downsides that apply to me that are probably going to apply to you as well. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. When you're capital gain harvesting, it's really nice to reset your tax basis because that could save you lots of taxes in the future, especially if tax rates go up. Now we can start talking about some of the downsides. The first downside is that it's going to increase your adjusted gross income, or also your AGI, because this is income that you are going to be realizing. Long-term capital gains, it increases your adjusted gross income. Now, on the surface of that might not be so bad. However, that adjusted gross income is used in many different things, especially when it comes to the federal government and state governments and things like that, for qualifying for many different things. And so having a lower AGI is generally better for qualifying for many of those things. This is a very broad reason on how long-term capital gain harvesting can affect you. Now, where are you going to perform capital gain harvesting? Well, this is really only going to happen in your taxable investment accounts. And that's because retirement accounts, like an IRA or a 401k or something similar to that, the money grows in there tax-free already. And so if you sell off assets and you rebuy them in there anyway, it doesn't really have any effect on your tax basis. And so that is only going to apply, this long-term capital gain like harvesting is only going to apply in a taxable account. Now, the next big thing that might happen if you do go ahead and realize long-term capital gains for harvesting reasons, you might get affected by this tax credit known as the Earned Income Tax Credit, okay? Because the Earned Income Tax Credit, it can be tremendously helpful for lots of people, like especially with families, and if you're in the lower income, if you're financially independent and you make a little bit of income every year, just on like a side gig or something like that, or a small business, then you might actually qualify for the Earned Income Tax Credit, especially if you have, a family with children and stuff, because your Earned Income Tax Credit might be higher if your earned income is lower. However, if you have an investment income of $3,650 or more, then it might disqualify you from the earned income tax credit, because the earned income tax credit, you're not supposed to have a lot of investment income in order to qualify for it. But still, if you have an income investment over $3,650, then it will disqualify you from the earned income tax credit. So you definitely need to look out for that. Another tax credit at number 3 that you really do need to look out for is also the saver's credit. If you do make a little bit of extra income on the side, even though you're financially independent, you just work a little bit just to make a little bit of money every year, kind of like a barista F.I.R.E thing going on there, then you may also qualify for the saver's credit if you're still putting a little bit of money into your retirement accounts, just to keep your tax bill at 0 while you're financially independent. The saver's credit can definitely wipe out a lot of your tax bill, especially for people who are in the median and lower income ranges. And if you're doing capital gain harvesting, then it's going to increase your adjusted gross income, which is what the retirement saver's credit is based on. And so you can pretty much say goodbye to the saver's credit if you are doing capital gain harvesting. Let's really quick talk about when you might want to use capital gain harvesting. Okay, so there are good reasons why you want to realize a taxable gain. A good reason why you might want to do that is maybe you expect that the tax rates to be higher in the future. So a lot of people think that they're going to be taxed higher in the future, and that very well could be, the truth. That really could happen. And so that's why a lot of people are investing in like Roth IRAs, or getting their money into Roth IRAs as soon as possible, because they want to make sure that they're not going to get taxed at high rates in the future. Another way of doing this, of avoiding some taxes in the future, is by doing these capital gain harvestings now while the tax rates are generally lower. So if you realize these capital gains and they're at 0%, we don't know. In the future, this could go away. Capital gain harvesting could possibly go away, or the tax brackets for long-term capital gains, they could be eliminated, they could be changed, whatever. We don't know. And so doing long-term capital gain harvesting now could lock in those low tax rates. And so maybe in the future, you don't have to pay as many taxes. But going back to our list here, we have another one at number 4. And number 4 is medical expenses for your itemized deductions. So if you have a high amount of medical expenses, or you or someone in your family, then generally speaking, you might be able to itemize your taxes if you have a really high amount of out-of-pocket medical expenses. In order to get deductions for itemizing your medical expenses, it has to exceed at least 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. And that's the amount that's going to be itemized on your tax deduction if you itemize your taxes. But if you are doing long-term capital gain harvesting, then it's going to increase your adjusted gross income. And therefore, the medical expenses as a percentage of your adjusted gross income are going to be lower because you increased your AGI. And so that could affect you if you are itemizing your taxes and if you are using medical expenses on that tax return. And speaking of medical expenses, number 5 on this list also has to do with medical, has to do with health insurance. So if you get your health insurance through healthcare.gov, then you may receive a tax credit. This tax credit may pay for part of your health insurance plan, depending on what your income level is. And a lot of us in the financial independence community are utilizing healthcare.gov. We are utilizing the marketplace health insurance plans in order to get low amounts of health insurance for ourselves or our family. And so if you fall into that boat, then you may be getting a tax credit depending on what your income level is, especially if you become financially independent and your income level may be a lot lower. You might qualify for a much larger tax credit. A lot of people are paying $0 for their health insurance because of that tax credit, because their income is lower. And this can be really effective once you're financially independent. However, if you go ahead and do capital gain harvesting, it's going to increase your adjusted gross income, which is then going to increase your modified adjusted gross income, which is what that healthcare.gov tax credit is based on. If you have a higher MAGI, then you're going to qualify for less of a tax credit. So if you're relying on that tax credit, you might not realize that you just kind of messed up that tax credit for our healthcare.gov, and you would have much higher out-of-pocket expenses for that same health insurance because you would lose that tax credit, or at least lose some of it, if you are doing capital gain harvesting. So you definitely need to watch out for that one. Because luckily for me, I get to use the VA health insurance since I was in the military, but my wife, on the other hand, we have her enrolled in healthcare.gov. However, we had to kind of wait on that one for the rest of this year because I really wanted to do capital gain harvesting. And so I was able to do capital gain harvesting this year, and I've calculated to be that I still fall within the 0% tax bracket when I go to file my taxes next year. But that would have definitely affected the health insurance plan at healthcare.gov, so we kind of had to find something else to fit that, to fill that void for the rest of this whole year. And so that might be something that you are also involved in, especially if you're going to use healthcare.gov while you are financially independent. But just as important as that, number 6 on this list has to do with something that not many people think about, and that is the state income tax. If you live in a state that taxes income, then you may actually be taxed on those long-term capital gains that you harvest in your account at the state level. So even though you might avoid taxes at the federal level by utilizing the long-term capital gains tax rates, you might not be able to avoid your state income tax rates. You might actually pay money on those long-term capital gains at the state level. It's really going to depend on what state you live in. Luckily for myself, I moved to the state of Tennessee, which does not tax income at all. And recently they actually got rid of taxes on investments. And so they are officially a 0% tax rate state. So there is no taxes on long-term capital gains. There's no taxes on personal income here. If you live in one of those states that doesn't tax income, then good on you. But if you do live in a state that taxes your income, long-term capital gain harvesting, it might get taxed in that state. And then we come to number 7, which is what I promised you earlier on. This is one that I think is probably one of the craziest ones. Is pretty simple if you actually think about it, but it's miscalculating. So it's really hard to estimate your total income, or especially earlier on in the year. You have no idea how much income you're going to get. You don't know how much capital gains you can safely do while paying 0%. So most of the time, if you're utilizing this strategy, you want to stay in the 0% long-term capital gain tax rate by utilizing this strategy. However, it could be easy to miscalculate and then pop into that 15% tax rate. And obviously, while 15% is going to be probably less than what you would get taxed at the ordinary income tax rate, it's still an unnecessary 15% tax to pay. So you have to be extra careful. If you get a bonus at the end of the year that you weren't expecting from work, that could bump you into that higher income tax bracket unnecessarily because you realize some long-term capital gains. And so you could unnecessarily pay 15% on some of those long-term capital gains. That would really just be unnecessary taxes that you realized early on. And so it's really important to make sure that you spend a lot of time calculating your long-term capital gains if you are going to be doing some tax gain harvesting. Another really important thing for you to do is to make sure that you watch a video that I created. It's a full guide to minimizing your income taxes, especially as it applies to achieving financial independence. So make sure that you watch that video if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Zach from OnCashflow.com, and I hope to see you next time.